Greetings. Today I'm going to be making a Chaos Lord in power armor. The idea behind this is to have something cheap points wise to buff the backfield, but with a bit of a melee punch in case someone sneaks up on him. As the rest of my Chaos Force is Slaanesh, this guy is going to be Emperor's Children, but it would not take a lot of modification to make him fit the other traitor legions. To do this conversion, I'm going to start with the Space Marine Captain originally from the Indultus box. While this guy has quite a few Imperial icons all over him, with a little effort we can fix that. To begin with, remove both parts of the body from the sprue and clean it of mould lines. The first thing I'm going to do to it is to work on the little purity seal on this belt reliquary thing. A few careful cuts with the sharp knife and this should come off quite nicely. This clean reliquary can now be acting as a base for some iconography, or maybe just be a shiny dangly bit on his belt. Next up we have the Indultus Crusade symbol thingy that is next to the dangly shiny reliquary on his belt. Removing this one is going to take a little more work, but it is simple enough in principle. First, I use the clippers to remove the bulk of the symbol, before coming in with my knife to reshape the area to match the cloth underneath as best as I could. It does not need to be perfect here, just remember to leave the little chain that held the symbol intact, as this will be handy for attaching a trophy to later on, which will also be handy to cover any small errors in the symbol's removal process. Now we've started to sort out the dangly bits, I figured the breastplate could do with some attention. It currently has a very large Imperial symbol on it, as do most Space Marine breastplates. Now if you wanted to, this could stay, maybe damage it a little and have it on there as a mockery of this guy's former allegiance, or as is this case, it can be removed. Again, come in with my knife here and begin taking off slowly, taking off only a little at a time to really get the shape of the chest right. I needed to come in from several directions to get the wings off of the gorge area, as well as around the mounting point for his rondel. Once the bulk of this has come off, and the shape is about right, I brought in a file to just smooth out the area. At this point, I also took the file to the cloth area around the dangly cloth thingy, as I felt it could do with being a little smoother too. In hindsight, I could have instead roughed up the whole cloth area, maybe given it a weathered look instead of filing it smooth, but I guess this guy looked after his gear a lot more than some. With that done, I'll move on to another couple of changes that I wanted to make to the body. To mark this guy out as being a follower of Slaanesh, I thought I could replace his tassets with some decorated shoulders from the Hellstriders kit. Where I'd be making this a different legion, I probably would instead just opt to keep the originals, maybe remove the skulls. To remove these, I took out my clippers and carefully cut around the dangly cloth bits. These could stay, as they would make great places to do some heretical writings later on. Once the bulk of the tasset is removed, I could use my knife to tidy the area and make any adjustments needed to fit in my replacements, remembering to bring my replacements up to the body to just test fit them every now and again. Once this step had been completed, the two halves of the body can be brought together with some plastic glue before looking to fit on those tassets. Now before attaching the tassets to his waist, some little adjustments were necessary. First, the one in his right leg had a slightly larger gap near the top than I would have liked, so I decided to fill it with some grenades. These ones were from a tactical squad kit. In order to use these to fill the gap, however, they would need a little trimming. So, I made an angled cut with my knife to fit the shape of the new tasset, and then they could just be glued into place. Whilst this sets, I moved on to the left side tasset. This one would just need a quick snip with the clippers so that it sat up against the holster on the guy's back. With that done, and with a good test fit, both tassets can now be glued into place. With his fancy tassets, our lord is now looking a little bit less like his loyalist counterpart, and to push this further I'm going to use a shield from the Hellstriders kit to replace his rondel. To do this, I picked out this shield with the little curved indents on the top and the bottom, and a raised band going down the middle. Taking my clippers, I carefully removed one half of the shield, keeping the raised banding intact, as this would form the edge to his new rondel. Once the bulk of the shield was cut off, I could move on to using my knife and the clippers in tandem to cut the shield down so that the banding, including its spikely bits, was properly forming the edge. I also at this point snipped off the hand on the inside of the shield that went to the original body, so that it was ready to fit on this one later. This did take some time to do without making a mess, and if one wanted to be quicker, you could just cut off the spiky bits, but I felt they added to the chaos feel quite nicely. With our edge nicely trimmed down, I test fitted and noticed that the tassel that hung down from the shield really did get in the way, so I snipped this off. At this point, I put this whole part to one side, as I needed to see where the arm would sit before I fitted everything. Speaking of arms, I was originally going to use the arm from the captain himself, with the symbols shaved off and a demonic sword in place of his original. But after much searching and deliberation in my bits box, I decided instead to use the empty hand from the Assault Intercessor's kit. Either way, the shoulder was going to be rather plain, and this would not do for a Chaos Lord of excess. To remedy this, I took the shoulder from the Age of Sigmar Lord of Pain kit I previously worked on, with this massive protruding spike. It seemed like just the thing to give to our Chaos Lord. So, taking my clippers and my knife, I removed a lot of the extra bits of the shoulder pad, before working with the knife and my half-moon file to shape the back end of the part to fit the Intercessor's shoulder pad. This took a fair bit of time, but it is worth doing right, as it would limit the amount of green stuff I would have to use later on. Again, this part I stuck to one side for now. With a quick test fit of the right arm, I could see that there was plenty of space to glue the rondel on without it getting in the way or looking sibby. So, a dab of plastic glue, and it was brought into place on the model. With this here instead of his normal shaped shield, he's definitely not looking so loyal to the Emperor anymore. But to reinforce this, I have this little Slanesh icon from the Hellstriders kit. Usually this piece would be on their banner or icon, but I thought it would make a nice pendant. One side of it had already broken off of its mounting point, so half the work was already done. For the other side, I just snipped it off carefully with my clippers, as this little horn would come in very handy another day, before making a slight bend on the rope part with my fingers, just so that it sat nicer on the model. Be very careful when doing this, however, as it is a very small part, could easily snap if too much pressure is used. Once I was happy with the shape, it could then just be glued into place. Now that the body is basically done, and the right arm pretty much sorted, I turned my attention to the left. The original plan had been to have him in a similar pose to the Indultus captain, and just clean off shield of its icons and chaos it up a bit. But after looking at the datasheets for a Chaos Lord, there was sadly no shield option in sight. Whilst I could just do it anyway and pretend that maybe he doesn't know how to use the shield, I had another plan in mind. Namely, this clawed hand here from the Possessed miniature in my start collecting box. But for this to work, I would need to do some adjustments to his left arm, namely, cutting it off from the elbow. As usual with the thicker parts, I did this with my saw, before cleaning the area with both clippers and a knife to remove what was left of the vambrace and clean the area up for a good join. Once this has been cut down to size and I was happy enough with the fit, I first glued the upper arm to the body. This would allow me to adjust the pose of the hand before making it permanent with glue. Whilst the glue on the arm sets, I realised I'd forgotten to stick a trophy on his dangly chain. For this, I have a Harlequin mask in my bits box from one of their jet bike kits, and to make it look more like it was torn from a defeated enemy, I'm going to use my drill to stick a hole through the front of it, before roughing up the edges of the hole with my knife. I also used the knife to score along the edges and take some chunks out the front of the mask for a little more damage. With this done, it can then be stuck on with glue, as if it were always meant to be hanging there on that chain. Back to the arms. After gluing the spike to the shoulder pad, it should look something like this, which can then be brought in with a bit more plastic glue and attached straight to the body in an appropriate position. With his arms on, I moved on to his backpack. For the backpack, I thought I'd go with something real fancy. This backpack is from the Master of Possessions, but if I were going to go for a less ornate one, a regular Chaos Marine backpack would do quite nicely. This doesn't have quite the same mounting points as the original Captain's one did, but it still fits fairly well nonetheless, and can just be attached in place with some plastic glue, making this fella really stand out quite a bit from his loyalist counterpart. Now let's talk heads. For these, I did have a few options. The Lord of Pain head would work for an Emperor's Children, I feel, as would any of the non-helmeted heads from the Hellstriders kit. But both of these would require a little green stuff work on the neck area to work well, and I was feeling quite lazy at this point. Plus, this guy didn't make Lord by leaving his head exposed. So, I went with option 3, and used one of the helmeted heads from the Chaos Space Marines kit. It's suitably ornate, and it needs no modification to fit. After attaching the head with some plastic glue, he just needs some green stuff work, and perhaps a spike or two if I can find any. First though, the green stuff, remembering to moisten the work surface and any tools to stop it from sticking. After cutting off a small amount of both colours and mixing it all together, I took a tiny bit and squished it into the gap on his left arm, where the possessed hand joins the arm, as there were some quite large gaps there, working in nicely with the sculpting tool. Finally, for this Chaos Lord, I felt the legs were a little bare, and I have some spikes here from the Hellstrider's Seeker mounts. With a quick trim to the base of the spikes, and a little shaping with my knife to fit the leg contours, this could be glued in place to bring this kitbash to a close. With a base added and a suitable paint job, he is ready for the tabletop. I think my favourite part of the painting here was trying out something with the flames. I think they came out rather well. Would definitely use this effect again. And with that, I'd just like to say a big thank you for watching, and I hope you feel inspired to go out and turn some of even the fanciest Loyalist miniatures into something a little more heretical. If you like this, please consider a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one all.